I bought you not as a human, but as livestock. How dare you speak to me of human decency?" On a bitter winter night in medieval England, where the freezing wind seemed to slice through flesh and bone, a scene of cruelty unfolded in the grand manor hall of Lord Godfrey, one of the wealthiest and most powerful landowners in the realm. In the muddy courtyard, agonizing screams echoed relentlessly alongside the brutal thud of heavy wooden cudgels. "My lord, I beg of you, did you not promise to save my father? When I agreed to serve your house for 50 shillings, did you not swear on the holy book to cure my father's illness?" The one sobbing and crawling through the blood-stained snow was Nora, a poor tenant farmer's daughter of barely 19 winters. Even under the merciless beatings, which were colder and more biting than the winter frost, Nora clung to but one hope: the life of her sick father, John, lying alone in their wretched thatched cottage. Yet, standing upon the high stone balcony of his manor, looking down at her with sheer mockery, Lord Godfrey's eyes held not a single drop of mercy. Lord Godfrey wore a vile smirk as he spat his cruel words. An ignorant peasant is so easily fooled. Your wretched father, John, breathed his last 4 days ago, before my men even dragged you to this estate. And those 50 shillings I sent to your hovel, my guards have already reclaimed every last penny. You are now utterly alone in this world, with nowhere to return and no one to lean on. So shut your mouth and do your duty. You are here to be locked away in the shadows and breed a child we shall claim as our own. Nothing more." Those words struck like a thunderbolt, and Nora's heart shattered into pieces. To save her father, John, she had sacrificed her freedom and was lured into a wicked trap, only to learn that he had already passed from this world. "Father, was it because of me? Did you die so miserably because of your sinful daughter?" Nora tore at her wool dress, wailing in absolute despair. Just then, the heavy oak doors of the inner hall creaked open, and a woman draped in an extravagant velvet gown stepped out. It was Eleanor, Lord Godfrey's daughter-in-law, and the true mistress of the house. She wielded the immense power of the lord's estate with an iron grip. But she harbored one fatal weakness. Though she had been married for many years, her womb remained barren. To hide this shame from the Holy Catholic Church and secure the noble inheritance, she had devised a dark conspiracy. Eleanor would heavily pad her gowns to feign a pregnancy to the outside world, while secretly imprisoning a kidnapped peasant girl to bear the actual heir. Eleanor stared down at Nora, who lay crumpled in the snow with eyes as cold as ice, looking at her as if she were nothing more than filthy swine. "My lord, the night grows late. Why cause such a ruckus? Low-born wenches like this are not tamed by the rod, but by starvation and terror. Only then do they become obedient. Guards! Drag this creature to the secret, windowless cellar beneath the western servant quarters and lock her away. Let no soul know she is here. Give her not a single drop of water. Let her throat burn and her stomach twist in agony. Only when she realizes her wretched place will she crawl willingly into my husband's bed in the dark." Eleanor's voice was as sharp as a winter blade. To her, Nora was merely a hidden vessel, meant to bear a child that Eleanor would snatch and present as her own lawful heir without ever threatening her own position as the lady of the manor. Dragged from the courtyard, Nora was thrown into the dark, damp stone cellar. The heavy iron latch clanked shut from the outside, plunging her into a pitch-black abyss. The agony in her heart was far greater than the pain in her battered body, so much so that she could not even shed a tear. "Father, John, forgive your sinful daughter, but I swear by the Almighty, I cannot close my eyes while those wicked monsters draw breath. I will survive. I will live to see this grand stone manor drown in rivers of blood." Nora clenched her jaw in the freezing darkness. It was the moment the fragile eyes of a peasant girl ignited with the hellfire of absolute vengeance. How many days had passed? The heavy door creaked open, and a chunk of stale barley bread and a wooden bowl of murky water were tossed onto the floor. To survive, and solely to exact her revenge, Nora shoved the dirt-covered crusts of bread into her mouth. She chewed and chewed, engraving the faces of Lord Godfrey and Eleanor into her mind. Finally, the night ordained by Eleanor arrived. Instead of Nora being brought up, Arthur, Lord Godfrey's only son and the heir to the estate, was secretly escorted down into the hidden vault. The gloomy cellar was dimly lit by flickering beeswax candles. Trembling with dread and profound humiliation, Nora kept her eyes fixed firmly on the cold stone floor. But the voice that broke the silence was entirely unexpected. "Are you cold? Seeing you tremble so violently brings shame to my heart." It was a low, gentle voice, yet frail and lacking in vigor. Slowly lifting her head, Nora saw that Arthur was a terribly pale young man with a fragile, hollowed frame. He suffered from a severe wasting disease of the lungs, living on borrowed time, not knowing which breath would be his last. The only reason Lord Godfrey and Eleanor had rushed this dark scheme was to secure a child before the dying son perished. Arthur rose slowly, took off his heavy, fur-lined cloak, and gently draped it over Nora's shivering shoulders. Nora, startled, scrambled backward. "Young master, why do you show such kindness to a low-born creature like me? I am nothing but a prisoner bought by the old lord." Arthur offered a sorrowful smile and let out a weary sigh. "Low-born? The most wretched and pathetic creature in this house is me, because I am too weak to command my own body. My father and my wife are ruining the life of an innocent woman like you. I have heard the whispers of your kidnapping. You lost your father, John, and were dragged into this lightless dungeon against your will. I am truly sorry. On behalf of my cursed bloodline, I beg your forgiveness." At the young lord's sincere apology, Nora's hardened heart wavered for a moment. She could hardly believe that such a gentle soul existed within this devilish household. Arthur did not lay a single finger on Nora. Instead, he spent the entire night sitting on a wooden stool, reading from a leather-bound book and coughing violently into his handkerchief. "My father and my wife keep a watchful eye outside this cellar. For now, we must pretend that we have shared a bed. It is the only way either of us will survive." Thanks to Arthur's mercy, Nora was granted a brief respite. However, The cruel vigilance of Eleanor meant Nora was forced to work like a slave in the dead of night. Since she had to remain hidden from the outside world, she was forced to scrub the deepest stone corridors and wash the filthy linens in the underground washrooms while the rest of the manor slept. From the harsh labor and the freezing laundry tubs, Nora's once soft hands became cracked, blistered, and bloody. Yet she gritted her teeth and endured, secretly hunting for Lord Godfrey's darkest secrets in the manor's belly. In those days, the entire kingdom was suffering under a bitter winter famine and the relentless taxation of greedy lords, plunging the commoners into absolute misery. Outwardly, Godfrey acted as a pious and honorable nobleman serving the royal court, but in the shadows, he stole the grain meant for the starving peasants to fill his own overflowing granaries. One evening, while sweeping the shadows near Lord Godfrey's private underground vault, Nora overheard a hushed conversation slipping through the crack of the heavy oak door between the lord and a shady merchant guildmaster. The 3,000 sacks of royal grain meant for the northern villages? Sell them to the black market smugglers for half the price. Mix the remaining sacks with sand and husks to distribute to the peasants. They are going to starve to death anyway, so why waste good grain on them? I need every last silver pound to bribe the Lord Chancellor and the ministers of the Royal Council. We must ensure our loyalists are appointed as sheriff of this shire and keep the king's eyes blind to our affairs. See to it that not a single penny is lost. Yes, my lord, do not worry. The ledger detailing our treasonous transactions is hidden where no soul will ever find it. Hearing this, Nora's entire body trembled with profound wrath. These men, who carved the flesh and drank the blood of the poor to fatten their own bellies, were the true bandits of the realm. Nora made a vow. If she could only find that secret ledger, she could bring Lord Godfrey's noble house crashing down in an instant. As she continued to sharpen the blade of her revenge, an unexpected tragedy and opportunity arrived. Arthur's illness worsened by the day, and the pressure from Lord Godfrey and Eleanor reached a fever pitch. Coughing up dark blood into his linen cloth, Arthur wept as he finally laid with Nora to protect her from his family's wrath. Nora, forgive me. I am committing the greatest of sins against you. No, young master, if this is my fate, I shall embrace it. Nora held Arthur tightly in her arms. Though she had entered this manor solely for revenge, she felt a deep compassion for the only person who had treated her as a human being. And 2 moons later, a change finally came over Nora's body. Since no apothecary could be summoned without risking the secret, Eleanor herself inspected Nora in the cellar. The girl is with child, Eleanor hissed, with a chilling mix of greed and murderous intent. Now that a child had been conceived, Nora's usefulness had a strict expiration date, the very day she gave birth. Eleanor returned to her chambers and summoned her most loyal servant. I cannot bear the thought of that filthy peasant carrying my husband's child. But we need the heir, so she must live in that cellar until the labor is done. The moment the child is born, slit her throat. We will take the babe upstairs and tell the world that the child came from my own womb. Do you understand? Yes, milady. It shall be done exactly as you command. Standing by the ventilation grate of the cellar, Nora overheard this wicked plot, and her heart turned to ice. The day she brought life into the world would be the day her own life was taken. But Nora was no longer afraid. Instead, she whispered with cold clarity, "You plan to kill me? Very well. Let us see who draws their last breath first." Nora rested her hand upon her growing belly, quietly calculating the hour of her revenge. "How dare you touch my husband's medicine? It is clear this wretched girl was attempting to poison the young master. Break her legs this instant." Eleanor's shrill, venomous screech pierced the damp air of the underground prison. Nora was now heavily with child, but to the vicious Eleanor, it only meant the time of birth was fast approaching. Desperate to create an excuse to execute the girl even a day sooner, she had laid a treacherous trap. "Milady, do you not fear the wrath of God? I merely went to check on the young master's herbal remedies." "Why do you frame me for such wickedness?" Nora clutched her swollen belly, resisting as she was forced onto the cold stones. Even in bone-crushing agony, the fire in her eyes refused to die as she glared directly into Eleanor's soul. "Look at the demon in her eyes! She is a witch, a true creature of darkness! Gart, what are you waiting for? Shatter her legs before the old lord returns." The moment the guards raised their heavy wooden cudgels, the heavy iron door burst open, and Arthur stumbled in, his face utterly drained of blood. His lips were stained red, as if he had just coughed up blood moments before. "Stop! Hold your hands, you fools! Do you dare strike her?" Arthur's voice was weak, yet it carried the undeniable weight of his noble blood. Stumbling forward, he placed his frail body between the young peasant girl and the cruel hands of the manor guards. "Eleanor, how can you be so merciless?" Arthur gasped, leaning heavily against a stone pillar. "That my body wastes away is the will of the Almighty, not the doing of this poor woman. You call yourself a pious wife, yet you scheme in the dark and treat the mother of my child with such venom? Is this the grace of our noble house? My lord husband, that low-born creature has bewitched you. Why can you not see my devotion to our legacy?" Eleanor stamped her velvet-slipped foot, her face twisted in bitter jealousy. But Arthur offered her nothing but a cold, disdainful shoulder. Turning his back on his wicked wife, he gently helped Nora back to her meager straw pallet. Late that night, Arthur sat by Nora, his breath rattling in his chest. "Nora," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crackling hearth fire. "I know my days on this earth are numbered, and I know as surely as the sun rises that my father, Godfrey, and my wife, Eleanor, will not suffer you to live once you have served your purpose. Before the Lord takes my soul, I must ensure that you and my child survive this cursed place." Tears spilled from Arthur's sunken eyes, catching the dim candlelight. Squeezing Arthur's trembling hand, Nora leaned closer and revealed the dangerous secrets she had unearthed. She told him of the hidden winter grain that Godfrey had stolen, leaving the village peasants to starve in the frost. She spoke of the heavy chests of silver used for bribery to the royal council, and exactly where the dark ledgers detailing these treasons were kept. Arthur's pale face grew even whiter with shock, but after a long, heavy silence, he slowly nodded in grim resignation. He had always suspected that the grandeur of his family's estate was mortared with the blood and tears of commoners. In a desperate bid for redemption, he resolved to help Nora bring his own house to ruin. "In my father's private cellar," Arthur coughed, wiping fresh blood from his lips, "there is a grand woven tapestry. Behind it lies a hollowed vault. Every ledger and treasonous parchment is kept there. I will gather the last of my fading strength to retrieve that ledger for you." A few days later, the inescapable moment arrived. In the dead of a freezing winter night, a terrible, gripping agony seized Nora's womb. Hours passed in agonizing torment in the hidden cellar, until finally, piercing through the cold night, the hearty cry of a newborn babe echoed against the stone walls. It was a boy, a healthy, strong son. Waiting like a vulture outside the heavy oak door, Eleanor shoved it open violently and snatched the blood-warmed infant from the midwife's hands. "It is done! The heavens have finally granted this manor an heir!" Eleanor cackled, a greedy, terrifying smile stretching across her pale face. "From this moment forth, this child is my son, my blood." Cradling the infant tightly, Eleanor turned her chilling gaze to the armed guards. "Listen well," she commanded. "The vessel has served its purpose. Deal with her as we agreed. Take her deep into the black woods, slit her throat, and bury her where not even the hounds will find her bones. Leave no trace of this peasant filth." The manor guards stepped forward, drawing their cold iron daggers. Nora, entirely drained of strength from the harrowing birth, could not even lift her arms from the blood-stained sheets. Yet, despite her helpless state, a strange, chilling smile crept onto her lips. "Eleanor?" Nora rasped, her eyes burning like coals in the hearth. "Do you truly believe you have won? The real fires of hell are only just reaching your feet." "What nonsense is this? Seize her at once!" Eleanor shrieked. But before the guards could strike, a blood-soaked figure blocked the cellar doorway. It was Arthur. In his trembling hands, he grasped a heavy broadsword. Though he was dying and coughing violently, his eyes burned with a fierce, protective light. Knowing he could never survive a ride through the winter storm, Arthur had used his authority as heir hours prior to dispatch his most loyal sworn guardsman with the secret ledger and a sealed missive to summon the royal magistrate. Now he stood as the final shield between Nora and the executioners. "Whoever takes another step towards her will join me in hell." Arthur roared, swinging the heavy steel to keep the guards at bay. In that very instant, the silent night above was shattered by the roaring blast of hunting horns. The heavy oak gates of the courtyard splintered under the force of a battering ram. The roar of 100 men and the blinding light of blazing torches flooded the lord's estate. The king's magistrate and the royal guards have surrounded the manor. Godfrey and his household are ordered to submit to the crown's justice. The sharp, booming voice of the royal commander cut through the air. Panic seized Eleanor. Clutching the crying infant, she fled upstairs toward the courtyard. When she arrived, the sight before her made her blood run cold. In the center of the muddy square, Godfrey was already forced to his knees, his wrists bound in heavy iron chains. The secret ledger Arthur's loyal guard had delivered contained undeniable proof of stolen winter grain, bribery of the Lord Chancellor, and treason against the crown. It was a crime punishable by death. Eleanor, screaming and thrashing wildly, had the newborn babe stripped from her arms by the royal guards. She was dragged away into the darkness, her grand velvet gowns trailing through the filth, her power and wicked dreams shattered in an instant. The grand, wealthy manor estate had fallen overnight, reduced to a den of traitors destined for the executioner's block. When the shouting faded and the courtyard fell into a solemn, torchlit quiet, Nora dragged her exhausted, aching body up from the cellar and out into the damp courtyard. She stumbled into the freezing mud, making her way to where Arthur lay. The young lord had finally collapsed, the heavy sword slipping from his grasp, his strength entirely spent from the desperate standoff. As Nora knelt beside him, the royal guards gently placed the swaddled infant into her arms. Arthur looked up at Nora and the baby, his vision fading into the dark, but a peaceful, gentle smile graced his pale lips. "Nora," he whispered, his voice like the rustling of dry winter leaves. "Because I met you, I was finally able to live and die as a righteous man. Take our child. Go far from this cursed valley and live a life of freedom." With those final words, Arthur weakly squeezed Nora's hand, closed his eyes, and breathed his last beneath the cold winter stars. Though he was the son of the man who had destroyed her family, he was also the man who had sacrificed his very life to save hers. Nora bowed her head over Arthur's chest and wept bitterly, her hot tears melting the frost on his tunic. "My lord," Nora whispered into the night wind, "the life you have given back to me, I will not waste. I will walk proudly under the sun with our child. May the angels guide you to a place of eternal peace." Nora held her baby tightly against her chest. The oppressive stone-walled manor that had been built on boundless greed and cruelty was eventually seized and dismantled. But from the ashes of that dark despair, the brave peasant girl and her newborn son had finally grasped true, unbreakable freedom. Those who had treated human lives like cattle for the sake of silver pounds and noble titles had fallen into the very pit they dug. But Nora, the low-born woman who had been trampled and despised, endured the darkest of winters and emerged victorious. As the golden light of the morning sun broke over the distant medieval village, chasing away the shadows of the long night, Nora wrapped her cloak tightly around her child. Stepping off the muddy castle road and onto the path of a new world, she walked forward, leaving the ruins of the past behind forever.